Hi guys, my name's Rye. Today I wanted to walk through how I did my plus 15 Floodgate with 0 deaths on my Preservation Evoker. I've had some commenters and some requests kind of come back and say, look, Floodgate's been causing me some problems. How do you get through Swamp Face? How do you get through some of the trash? And I'm going to show you guys the easiest ways as Preservation Evoker to get through this key. I found this key to be actually relatively challenging, but it's probably one of my favorite this season, and throughout this entire dungeon pool, it's got to be one of the best from a tank healer and DPS perspective. Keep in mind, I have pretty standard talents here. I am running Kalabusara, and for some of you that have asked, I'm not really planning on dropping it again this season. Your Life Spark procs within your Lifeline window are so incredibly valuable, and losing them or not having them are pretty insane. As I start this key off on this first pull, I always make sure that I use my pre-tip to scales for Fire Breath, and then I do a setup stasis here. We do accidentally get the crab from the water, which puts an extra dispel on this pack, but it's not too bad and not too much of a problem as I can just dispel it. Your biggest concern on this pull is that there are 2 surveyors in this pack. A surveyor can throw dynamite at your party, and on a plus 15, even a 14, even higher, if you get doubled by a dynamite and you don't have a defensive buff, it's very easy to just die. I would recommend that if you get dynamite targeted on you, you just press obsidian scales right away, and you use whatever healing cooldowns you need to get through this pull. This includes using things like time dilation, rewind, emerald communion, and making sure that your stasis is prepped for a quick release on a shredder dynamite surveyor overlap. This overlap might not happen, but it's the easiest way you could lose somebody in this pull, and you need to be cognizant that you have to have a bunch of healing ready just in case somebody does get globaled. Otherwise, your only prerogative is, pressing Living Flame and Fire Breath, etc. Our tank elects to pull down here, and since we don't have Mind Soothe, we're not doing any crazy skips in this route. We're not doing anything too fancy, and this is a pretty standard route. It's not the same route I would be doing if I were to be tanking. However, I did end up liking it, and it did end up working out in our favor. As you kind of get back and you're fighting surveyors again, you have to be cognizant of the dynamite. Remember, on these pulls, you don't need your healing CDs for the next couple minutes, especially as you have a lot of time before going into Big Mama, unless you are choosing to lust it. I'd recommend that you just press anything you need to stay alive here. I'm keeping reversions of my party, keeping Dream Breath rolling, and when I can, I'm making sure that I'm using Rescue. If you're familiar with the Architect, you'll know that he'll put a root out with the nail bolts on a party member. You can actually rescue this root and remove the stun from your party. Meaning that, let's say for instance, I get nail gunned here, I can press rescue on somebody else and get rid of the root if I needed to. The problem is, on Preservation Evoker, you can't actually Verdant Embrace while you're rooted, so you want to make sure that you clear yours is kind of a priority. You're going to want to be life binding a lot on this trash, and as you can see, I'm getting absolutely blasted down. I think I got targeted by like every nail bolt, every dynamite, and every surveyor beam, so I was having a pretty tough time there, but I did manage to get through the trash okay, and on to the next one. One important note that you can kind of pay attention to here is the RPG in this pull. You can actually Pressing Roar, and if you're playing with a Paladin or a class that can stun, or if you're opting to take Terror of the Skies, you can put a big stun up on this RPG Demolisher or Demolitionist and delay his cast for a very long time. On Prez, you have 3 capable stops, 2 if you're not talented into it, so you can stop this, pretty consequentially. I would recommend still keeping out a lot of healing on this pull. If your tank does elect to do this pull, you know that there should be some trick shotters in here, and anytime somebody's going to get doubled, you want to make sure that they have healing rolling on them. You can see there's an absolute ton of damage here, and even for like a pretty simple trash pack, this is like a 1.5 million HPS pull, and it's very sporadic damage. The problem with these pulls is that if you're not set up to like expect the incoming damage through things like having Echo, having reversions out for Grace Period, or other healing, you're going to have a hard time. This is a pull too that you don't want to commit too much to just because you're going into the boss soon. Depending on your route, you might play more in this area, but if you do go into boss, you want to make sure that you have something on pull. I do have Comedian, I do have Rewind in 45 seconds, and I do have Stasis in 20. On Big Mama, there are a bunch of different ways that you can approach this boss. One of the things that I like to do is I need to know that I need Tip the Scales for the trash bag after this pull, so I can commit Tip the Scales twice. One during the phase and one off cooldown, and then I should have it back on the trash pull after. If I don't, there are ways around that, but I want to make sure that I have proper CD cadence and timing that I can get through and have enough healing to deal with the blood workers. Bloodworkers are just as deadly as this boss, but you need to know that you need to make sure that you can get healing ramps done for every single phase of Big Mama, including if there's a shield phase. During this regular phase, you're pretty much just blasting adds. Your Life Giver's Flame from your Fire Breath is going to carry a lot of healing in this phase. You can pretty much just keep out reversions, keep out some Life Bind, Dream Breath, and then as well, when you're about to go into the phase, start ramping. You can see here that I ramp with Stasis, Tip the Scales, and I go into my TA and Large Dream Breath. This first jumpstart is very easy for me, and I don't really have to commit anything because I have Stasis. A trick is, if you get caught in needing to heal the shield beforehand, it's completely acceptable to start ramping your Stasis on the shield if the adds aren't dead. Remember, when the adds aren't dead, that's what's going to cause the pulsing shield on the boss, which is going to make the healing requirement a lot harder. But if your DPS don't have damage CDs, or perhaps the baits are really bad and the drones are flying around, you might not kill them in time. This is the best approach that I found to do it, is prepping that Stasis beforehand and then releasing it during the jumpstart. If you do have raid CDs, this is also a great time to use Zephyr, and on every single one of those jumpstart phases, you should have Obsidian Scales and Renewed Blaze, making you pretty immortal. I would refrain from trying to use Renewed Blaze in this phase, as you probably shouldn't need it, but if you get targeted a bunch and you find yourself struggling, remember you do have two charges of Obsidian Scales, so it is completely acceptable to use one here. For any of the healing ramps that I don't have Emerald Communion or Stasis, I'm going to use Rewind, and as well, I want to make sure I use Emerald Communion once on this fight. As the shield goes up here, you can see I start my healing ramp, and we go into a jump start, and I use a huge Life Bind here, followed by a TA, followed by a Dream Breath. I do call to commit Darkness, and because our Darkness value and AMZ is so high, I opt to not use Emerald Communion or Rewind. If I didn't have a raid CD here, I probably would have used one of those two buttons, but as you can see from my buttons, I'm trying to save something for every phase. Whether it be Zephyr, Stasis, or Rewind or Communion, you just need something to get through that phase. Again, your prerogative should be hitting adds, ramping for jumpstarts, and then having a little bit of healing over the shield. One thing you can get caught in is not having Dream Breath for the jumpstart or the shield phase. If you don't have Dream Breath out, there are ways around it, but you want to make sure that you're just Life Binding. Remember, Life Bind's still your best friend on almost any kind of trash encounter or boss encounter this season, so using it pretty liberally, just setting that Echo, 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 Burden Embrace into Spirit Bloom, Dream Breath, or even Golden Hours or Life Spark procs are going to be really helpful for you. We get the Kill O Block Buster shield up, I do send some Echoes out, I do get my Life Bind going, and I hit a large Spirit Bloom for the first start of the jumpstart. One combo I really like too, and isn't really talked about enough, is how insanely powerful that Leaping Flames interaction is with Life Spark. If you do full charge a Fire Breath on a boss and then decide to use those Leaping Flames on party members, especially in conjunction with a Life Bind, it's a really quick lay on hands that's instant and doesn't really take any cast time. So you can prep for a big hit using, a full charge Fire Breath into a, if you're sitting on a Life Spark proc, into a full combo onto your team. That's like an instant cast lay on hand CL. It's really powerful. As Big Mama comes to an end, I'm starting to think about what buttons I have available to me to fight the Blood Warper. I have Rewinds, I don't yet have Tip the Scales, and I don't yet have Stasis. I do have Emerald Communion up, so I do have two very large buttons to deal with this pretty difficult trash encounter. I want to make sure that I have TAs out, especially for my Grace Period buff on this ad. As soon as I get into Stasis or Tip the Scales, this thing is really easy to deal with. However, if I don't have either, I find it to be pretty difficult. So I do end up hitting a big Spirit Bloom there into an immediate Communion. This makes it so that my Spirit Bloom and my Communion are lasting within my Life Bind window, and my party basically doesn't take any damage. Well, they do, but I heal it up, right? So, as you can in this next Blood Warper cast, I'm starting to think about what I have, and I do have Tip the Scales. I send a huge Tip the Scales off, and you could see that I abuse my Life Bind Potion and my Life Bind Life Spark, and my team is able to get through this pretty nasty dot pretty easily. Ideally, because we're fighting two Blood Warpers, I want to save something for both. I don't know if we end up getting Lust for next pack, so I want to make sure I have something as big like Stasis, Tip the Scales, or a Rewind. Rewind isn't exactly amazing on shields, but it is still a pretty good healing cooldown on the Blood Warpers as there's a lot of ticking damage, so it's probably like one of your weakest buttons on these pulls. but the Blood Warper casts of the Blood Infusion do take longer than 5 seconds, so your life bind's not going to cover the entire ramp. Making sure that you have secondary and tertiary healing, such as your Dream Breath Hots, your Reversion Hots, and something else to cover outside of life bind is going to help you a lot. I do put that Oppressing Roar out, and we do get the 8-second Hammer of Justice on the ad. As you can see here, I immediately open with my Stasis, a very large Spirit Bloom, I use my Renewing Blaze, and I use a big Dream Breath. Since we didn't have Lust up, this did make this pull a little bit harder, but as you can see, as soon as I release my next Stasis with Echo, 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 I go into Lifebind here, and I Spirit Bloom, and then Stasis release. My party's more than topped and able to get through this pull okay. I do commit Rewind there, just as kind of a protocol to make sure that we don't lose anybody at the end of the pull, and also that I know that I won't need it for anything else. One really big tip as a Preservation Invoker in a lot of these keys is you have to know what is coming and what isn't. Rewind is a very good cooldown for reactive damage, so if you know you need to use it just to save somebody, go ahead and slam it. There's very few pulls where I use Rewind as a planning tool to be able to get through an encounter. Same with Emerald Communion, but Emerald Communion also takes setup time and ramp. One thing I find too, that in some of the Preservation Invokers I've coached, or some of the ones that have come into my stream or asked questions, when I go and look at their logs, they barely use these buttons. My biggest advice is use Rewind whenever you feel like you need to. Even if it's in a point of panic, use it just reactively when there's a ton of spike damage going out and you can't handle any of the incoming rot. This pull up here, I personally really don't like to heal, as it does involve double Surveyor. What we talked about earlier, as you could see at the very start of the pull there, I immediately have to press Obsidian Scales because I get 2 Throw Dynamites on me. When I have 2 Throw Dynamites, if I don't have a wall there, I immediately die, and now I'm watching out for my team to see if they're going to get double thrown as well. This is a good pull to have Tip the Scales on, Stasis, Rewind, or Communion, as there's going to be a lot of random unexpected spot damage. As you can see, even before the damage comes out, I'm casting a Spirit Bloom, I'm keeping Echoes out, Burn Embracing, and I'm keeping my Fire Breath on cooldown for Lifegiver's Flame. I do TD my Druid there, as he does get Throw Dynamite and as well the Nail Gun. It does manage to keep him alive barely, but we do happen to have some crabs in this pull as well, which are going to take us down. This is an awfully chaotic pull, and I really wouldn't recommend, if you're route planning, to try to do this. I think it's fine if you're lusting, maybe in a lower key, but as you can see, there are a lot of things that can go wrong. For instance, if the Druid got double throw Dynamite, or even the Havoc, and didn't have Blur or Bark, what you're going to end up in is a situation where your DPS might just die, and there's nothing really you could do. TD is on a 1-minute cooldown, and Rescue sometimes isn't always enough due to positional requirements. You could end up getting somebody killed on a back like that, so be very cautious when entering these pulls, and remember the rule of just always keeping healing ready. As you've probably seen from a lot of this dungeon, on the left hand side of my screen, I keep Stasis on cooldown a lot. On a lot of these packs, there's absolutely no reason why you shouldn't be using Stasis. If you're going to be healing with Spirit Bloom and your Empowers, you might as well just hit Stasis anyway, unless you know you're going to need it for a Blood Worker or something like very specific. I would just recommend just slamming Stasis and putting your Empowers in it, and you're going to have a pretty good time. I think for the most part, this trash isn't too bad from a healer perspective. This key was also before they nerfed Fortified 10% this past week, so keep in mind that even on a 15, this key is hitting substantially harder than you might encounter. If you aren't following, basically what happened was Blizzard implemented some improper scaling, which resulted in the Fortified damage of all these trash packs scaling 10% instead of 20%. That is multiplicative with the Zaldath Skyle, and as well the key level scaling. So mobs were doing substantially more damage in this key than you probably have when you'll be doing a 15 if you're watching this video and you're trying to learn. The bosses didn't change, they're all pretty much the same, it's just the trash. But I'll talk about this boss a little bit. When you're going in this boss, the only thing you really need to be cognizant of are the sharp shots, which happen on your party members throughout the encounter, and as well the fire debuff that goes out here that you need to dispel. If your team members do not have a defensive when they get the cinders on them, you're going to need to press Time Dilation or Rescue or something big on them. The problem is that if they're not in the appropriate place to be able for you to dispel them and you need to blow up a bomb, what's going to happen is that they're going to take a ton of ticking damage from the dot. Anytime that you see that I have the dot on me personally, I'm pressing Renewing Blaze and Obsidian Scales. If there's ever a time I don't have Renewing Blaze or Obsidian Scales, I am using Time Dilation on myself. If you want to be really crafty on this boss, you can also rescue people over to the bombs. As you can see there, even through Bark, my druid did take a tick as I kind of waited to make sure he was in the right place, and it did almost kill him. Keep in mind though that my druid in this party is only about 655 item level, I think. This is a friend of ours, and he was just gearing up this druid. As you can see here, I do time dilate my druid and he does go in bear form as I'm a little bit scared, but you can see that the time dilation is ticking very hard. Anytime these quick shots go out, I want to start ramping and prepping those echoes and those dream breaths to get a little bit of secondary healing out of my party. Again, the only time I think somebody can actually die on this fight is if they get the combo of a sharp shot and as well the overlap. I apologize for the phone alarm there. Once this fight is done, you want to keep in mind about what your next pull is going to be. Likely is you're going to be fighting a couple kelp and then going into the swamp boss. One thing to note is on this boss, you can probably use any cooldowns you need to, and if you feel like you need to rewind, or maybe your team missed a bomb, feel free to use Emerald Communion, Stasis, and you can resend Tip to Scales as late as you want on this boss, I think. The only thing that you really want is Stasis and Tip to Scales for fighting Swamp Base. Meaning that if you do have a pull after this, you can be liberal to kind of like resend if you need. As you can see there, I resend Tip the Scales just for fun. I don't really need it, and all I need to do is make sure that I want it on Swamp Base. As you can see, my DH there does get hit with bomb and does health pot, and I do time dilate him, but he is very far from the bomb. So in that case, you need to make sure that they have enough substantial healing on them to stay alive through a debuff. I probably should have rescued him there, but I also didn't know where he was going, and we were kind of talking a little bit about the next boss fight, so I think we were all a little bit distracted. The next pull in the dungeon for us is a bunch of divers. This is pretty much a non-healing requirement from Preservation Evoker perspective, but one thing to note is that they do have a harpoon cast. You can kick this, and you can stop this. However, if it does happen to go through, remember you do have Cauterize to get rid of the bleed. This harpoon will suck somebody in and do a ton of damage, so making sure that you do Cauterize this team member if they do get the debuff is going to be your imperative. As you can see, we're calling for kicks, we're pushing out of the bombs on the ground, and we're blowing up this pack. My resend on Tip the Scales, knowing that we were doing this pull, was probably pretty bad, as I think I could have sent it here for more damage, but ultimately, it doesn't matter too much because what I really want is just having it up on pull for Swamp Base. The Disturbed Kelp Pack can also be pretty deadly from a healer perspective, and especially for Prez, you want to make sure that you're not using any healing cooldowns on this pack. Meaning that you don't want to use Rewind, you don't want to use Emerald Communion, you don't want to use Stasis, you don't want to use Tip the Scales. This is definitely a team coordination pack where you're going to need to use coordinated stops to be able to get through it. If you guys do happen to miss, I would recommend at the very most, like, you could use maybe Emerald Communion here, but I would recommend trying to not use Stasis or Tip the Scales, as it's going to mess up your cadence on the next boss. I assume why some of you are watching this video specifically for how to handle Swamp Base on Prez, and my number one advice to you is having that Stasis and Tip on pull, and I can't iterate that enough. Once you have that on pull, you're going to be able to fill those gaps really easily. I'm going to show you the exact tricks of what I do for the entire fight, and I'll pause the video before I start. Remember on this pull too, you can use things like your Deep Breath Stun, your Tail Whip, your Push, and your Kick. If you do have a Purge in your group, you can also let these casts go off on these Disturbed Kelp and then just purge them, but we unfortunately only have one Purge on our Havoc Demon Hunter. We have less coming up in 3 minutes, and we're about to fight Swamp Base. And as you'll note here, I'm going to show you and pause really quickly about what I do. When this encounter begins, there's a cadence of 30 seconds for each phase. meaning that you can have a Spirit Bloom and Dream Breath for each start of every phase. Each phase lasting approximately 30 seconds is going to put a dot out on 4 party members, your tank and all 3 of your DPS. You're going to be at full health this fight, so it's going to be a little bit hard for you to abuse things like your Lifebind health pots and your Renewing Blaze. However, you want to make sure that at the start of every phase you're rolling Dream Breath, you're keeping Echoes out for Lifebind, and as well you're alternating raid cooldowns when needed. This includes things like Zephyr, AMZ, Darkness, and if you need to, Personals. I am in Discord with my team at this point, and these are all people I've played with, so I have some pretty high trust in them, meaning that I know that they're going to listen to my call whether or not to press a defensive if needed. Starting this fight, I'm always going to start the first cycle with Tip the Scales, Spirit Bloom, TA, and Dream Breath, and then have that first release on the first AoE. This is going to be the coziest part of the entire encounter, and it's going to be able to sync back up for 2 minutes when I get my second Stasis and Tip the Scales. Anytime you have Stasis and Tip the Scales, it's going to be basically your free round for the entire course of healing, meaning that the rest of the fight, when you don't have Stasis or Tip, you're going to have to break it up. You have to find clever ways of how to deal with this difficult healing encounter. What you're going to see is I abuse Life Spark a lot, and as well keep Lifebind up on CD. I am running 30% haste here, meaning that my Verdant Embrace cooldown is very short, and with Tip the Scales, I can use it twice on every encounter. You might get to a point here where you want to desync Stasis and Tip the Scales, and I think that that's a really good idea too. But you're going to see as this phase starts, and as I talk through it slowly, I have my Echoes out, I have Verdant Embrace, I hit Stasis, Tip the Scales, Spirit Bloom, TA, and Dream Breath. Now I'm putting new Echoes out of my party, I'm hitting some Living Flames on the boss, and you're going to see I Lifebind here, and as that Lifebind window is lasting, I release my Stasis and my party's health doesn't move. This is the very, very easy phase for the fight, and we're going to follow the exact same cadence for the rest of this, except we're not going to have Stasis Tip the Scales. I'm going to get Bloodlust in 75 seconds, but as you can see here, I start the phase by rolling that Dream Breath. You're going to have Dream Breath for every single phase, so it's going to be very, very easy for you to get through this. I use Echo, Verdant Embrace, and then I use Life Spark procs to get us handled, and I call for AMC. If I need to, on any phase that I'm kind of scared or my team doesn't have defensives, I'm going to be hitting Rewind, Emerald Communion, or a Health Pot. This is also a very good fight that you can abuse your Health Pot Lifebind only during the AoE part of the phase. During this phase, you're going to have full Mastery benefit, and as you can see, I'm just rolling Echoes on my team, casting a full Spirit Bloom, putting TA out, putting some reversions, and then Echo, into Lifebind, into my Life Spark procs, into my Golden Hour reversion. As you can see here, my Druid sat on Bark for a really long time because I'm telling him just to hold until we're in a place of scarcity. We have one more round, and you can see my Tip the Scales is coming back up in 25 seconds. Personally, I want to link the two on this fight because it makes my timings on bubbles really easy and on this encounter. But you're going to see that I do the same thing, which is Echo, Lifebind, Dream Breath, Hardcast Spirit Bloom, and if I need to here, I'm going to press something like Emerald Communion. But what I do abuse here is my Fire Breath into my Leaping Flames procs. As you can see, none of these are actually that difficult on our team, and I still haven't even used Emerald Communion. I'm at 43% mana, and now I'm back into Stasis, Tip the Scales, Spirit Bloom, and Dream Breath, which means that on this phase, we're going to be basically immortal for the duration of this encounter. Bloodlust does go out, I'm using my Echo, I Verdant for Lifebind, and I do release my Stasis here. Remember I'm still sitting on Emerald Communion. Because we aim to have Bloodlust in this boss, which I assume most of you will, even in your pug routes, it'll make it a lot easier, but I think lusting halfway through this boss does make it easier on the healing requirement as well. As you can see, I do put a rescue out there in my Druid. I'm Echo, and because of how much haste I have, my Verdant Embrace is already back up. I can do another Lifebind window. As I Lifebind, I Life Spark, and my team is topped. If I needed to there, I still had Time Dilation, I still had Emerald Communion, and I had tons of buttons available to me if needed. My Druid sat on Bark, and he trusted me, and we sat on Blur as well. My Demon Hunter never had to use Nether, and we were able to get through that fight very, very cozy. I'm going to pause this again as we kind of get into bubbles. And one of the main reasons why I wanted to kind of sit on Emerald Communion was because of bubbles timing. Sending stasis and tip to scales first on pull and midway through the fight is going to give you impeccable timing for fighting bubbles if your route does choose to do it. The reason why I want all those things lined up is midway through bubbles, they're going to come back and I'm going to have an entire another healing ramp. As you can see, I have stasis in 28 seconds, I have Emerald Communion, I have 2 charges of Obsidian Scales, I have Renew and Blaze, and I have Time Dilation. Anytime you start prepping to fight bubbles, you want the same healing combo that you're always kind of following, which is keep your echoes out, keep some reversions out if you can, and as soon as this first AoE hits, you're going to life bind, press Renewing Blaze or Scales into a big Spirit Bloom, into TA, into Dream Breath. I'd recommend doing big Dream Breaths on bubbles as opposed to little Dream Breaths because the rot damage is like very quick and it's pretty upfront. But for every single time you should have something. So for instance here, we're going Echo, 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 and then I'm going to follow that same pattern again. I Spirit Bloom into Emerald Communion, and now my basically life bind covers the rest of this. If I didn't have Emerald Communion there, this would have been a little bit scarier, but I still remember I had Dream Breath as well. But Emerald Communion does give me some mana back and does make things pretty cozy for me. I still do have a charge of Obsidian Scales. I go in, I hit my Stasis, I hit my Tip the Scales, Spirit Bloom, TA Dream Breath, and now we're basically immortal because I'm back in Stasis. For the next one, I'm going to be able to release my Stasis and we're going to be completely topped. You can see that post-buff how easy this is per Preservation Evoker, and I don't have any problems with any of this. This is my first time in a 15 post-buffs and Floodgates, and I found this to be like really easy. Given that beforehand I'd kind of been trained with 20 some odd % less output, so if you're using these tools, I think this is my approach. Maybe it's not the only approach, maybe it's not the best, but it's one that I find that worked for me. In this next pull, you are dealing with double Electrician if you choose to so pull it, meaning that you do have a Dispel and you're going to be looking out for kicks. If your team does pull the Jump Starter in on the left, this is also going to pose a little bit of a problem for you as a healer. Anytime you're fighting a Jump Starter, you want a very large healing ramp as you're going to have to deal with Jump Starter plus Electrician overlaps in these pulls. What is that? The Electrician is going to put out his healing, or sorry, his Dispel level debuff, and as well the Jump Starter is going to do his pulsing AoE. Luckily, we didn't have to do that in this pull, but the next pull I think we are going to be doing it, meaning that I do have to have a bunch of healing ready. I do have Stasis back up, I have Tip the Scales in 35 seconds, and I have Rewind if needed. As we are playing all the trash and the rest of the key, luckily, even though it's not the most efficient thing, it's kind of great for content. I'll kind of show you what kind of cadence you need to kind of get through these jump starter pulls, which can be kind of deadly. But as always, Zephyr the first tick as I'm running in, just to help us get stable. It is fine to also save Zephyr for the next pack if you need to, and as well here, you can see that I'm trying to save Stasis and Tip the Scales for the next pack if needed. I do commit, and I can commit any healing here that I need if needed, but mostly what's your number one prerogative is going to be dispelling your team off cooldown. Anytime anybody gets that electricity debuff, you want to be dispelling them immediately. If they don't get dispelled, myself included, it's very easy that somebody could die from an overlap of a jump starter and a dispel. You can see here my Druid does drop pretty low from a cast. I rescue him. And now we're just kind of keeping back to keeping some healing up in the team. I do put a big Fire Breath out, and just with a little bit of a combo here, I'm able to top my team pretty quickly. I tell my tank to wait 1 second as we go in here, but I do have every cooldown I need to be able to deal with this double jump starter pack. I don't think this pack is too bad if you have cooldowns, but if you go in without Stasis and with the Tip the Scales, you're going to see it's a pretty difficult time. I do hit Obsidian Scales right away, and you'll see here, one thing that I do note is that I don't release my Stasis right away and I don't immediately cast my healing spells. Watch very carefully about my timing of spells and my life bind. I kind of wait a couple seconds before the jump starters are going to tick before I actually queue a heal. Meaning that right here, you can see that the heal goes off and then I heal and I'm not pre-healing. The reason why is there's a couple seconds between each cast, and if you start casting a Spirit Bloom right away to top your party from the next hit, you're going to miss the entire window and overheal. So Echo, 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 and then I use my either Dream Breath or my Spirit Bloom, and as you can see right there, I took a little bit of extra time just to top my team immediately. I do commit rewind on one of the last hits of the pack to keep our Druid alive, and then as well, I'm just keeping things out like my TAs, my reversions, and my life binds. One thing to note is this boss can also be really problematic if you don't have a good cadence to it. If you kind of fall behind your healing cooldowns, it is kind of difficult, but I have tried a few different approaches to this boss, and I'm actually not sure what the best one is yet. I'm not convinced saving stasis for each one of the phases is good, and I'm not convinced that, saving stasis for the supercharge is good either. On the very first healing ramp of the encounter, you'll see that this is actually pretty difficult for me. I do use my, I basically use like no buttons here, and we're basically just trying to like limp through it. And the reason why is I wanted stasis for this phase, I didn't have tip the scales yet, and I wanted to see if I could save Emerald Communion. It was actually a pretty bad mistake on my part, and my team almost did die because I was very greedy. Anytime you have a super zap on you, you want to combine Renewing Blaze and Obsidian Scales. For every single one of these zaps, you're going to have Renewing Blaze for because of the way the phasing works, so you should be saving Renewing Blaze for every single one of the zaps in these phases. Always save at least a charge of Obsidian Scales too. I think I did lose a 16 just because of that. And as you can see, I'm really happy I saved my Communion, as I would have died here. It's my own mistake. My Druid does get zapped there, and I don't have a lot of healing for him, but I do commit my healing ramp on him. And now I'm just going to be hitting some echoes out, getting my life bind, and as well hitting tip the scales and Spirit Bloom. These turbocharge phases are kind of difficult for Prez as they last pretty long, but there are many ways to get through them. I'd recommend keeping at least one healing cooldown for every one, whether it be Rewind, Emerald Communion, or Tip, and then trying to keep stasis for this phase. I think one thing that I have experimented with a little bit is, stasis on the second set of Mega Zaps, and then that way too, you'll have your stasis overlap and carry over into the next phase, as you're going to see here. But in terms of triage healing, this boss works no different than the first boss in Cinderbrew. If you have watched my video on Cinderbrew, you'll see that for every single time anybody gets these brew debuff, you want to keep two things on them: Echo Reversion and then Echo Lifebind. As you can see here, my team gets zapped. I set up my healing ramp, and then this time I cancel my Spirit Bloom so I can set up my stasis. We do commit Dark and Melee, and now I'm just putting echoes out on my team, Echo, 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 Burn Embrace, and then I release my stasis. As you can see, releasing my stasis, this one was a little bit cozier, but at the same time, it can still be a pretty difficult healing requirement if you don't have buttons. I think the best approach to it is like spending as much as you need on that phase and then being a little bit more liberal in the Mega Zap phase, because all you really need to do is making sure that you do have enough healing to get somebody through a single target triage heal. So you can see on my Druid there, he didn't have Bark, so I did hit him with TD. I'd be very careful on this fight about using time dilation too. If you're going to use it, make sure you use it on the first set of Mega Zaps and not the second set, as time dilation is going to be ticking into the intermission, which is going to be really difficult for you. As this phase kind of ends, as you can see here, I hit Renewing Blaze, Obsidian Scales, and we're going to be going into the phase, and with me being topped. I set out my Temporal Anomaly, I hit my Zephyr, and as well, now I'm just setting up my healing ramp. I did get tip the scales back, which helped me a lot, and then I'm using my regular healing cadence, which is Echo, 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 Burn Embrace, and as well Health Pot, Spirit Bloom, or if I need to, use a big healing cooldown. At this point, the fight's almost over, and I still have Rewind available, and as well Emerald Communion coming up. My Druid does have Bark for these saps. I have Scales, but no Renewing Blaze, but that's okay, as I'm able to get completely topped just from a big Spirit Bloom crit and Lifebind. I did choose to ramp my stasis there just because the fight's almost over. If it wasn't almost over, I probably would have left stasis for the next set of Mega Zaps, but like I said, I haven't figured out a perfect art on this fight. This is just kind of what worked for me, but as you can see, it's not entirely locked in yet. I think there are definitely a lot of micro improvements I can do to make this fight a lot more comfy for myself and my team. With that in mind, that is how I time my +15 Floodgate with 0 deaths on my Preservation Evoker. Hopefully this helped you get through Swamp Base, maybe some of the more difficult trash, and maybe a little bit of setup to deal with the jump starters and the last boss. I think the biggest advice I can give you for this key is that the last boss slams and you can do a lot of different things to get through it, but making sure that you always save that Renewing Blaze for the Mega Zaps, and as well keeping something, whether it be a raid cooldown or a major healing cooldown for the intermission, is going to help you a lot. Thanks again for all the support these past couple weeks. I hope you've been enjoying the Prez videos as well as the Brew and BDH videos. But with that in mind, if there's anything else you'd like to see, anything specific regarding preservation, or just generally how you're doing, or if you have any questions, feel free to come drop by my Discord, which is in the comments. Or as well, feel free to drop something below, and I'll try my best to respond to it when I can. Thanks again, guys, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.